My name is Kale, and I used to believe family meant something. Used to believe that blood was thicker than water, that when push came to shove, your own would catch you before you hit the ground. I learned the hard way that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones holding the knife. It started with a phone call from the hospital. 3 broken ribs, a concussion, and a dislocated shoulder courtesy of a drunk driver who decided red lights were merely suggestions. My car was totaled. My body was a road map of bruises and bandages. And my bank account was about as empty as my faith in humanity. The medical bills were piling up faster than snow in a blizzard. And my part-time job at the tech repair shop barely covered my rent, let alone emergency room visits. That's when I swallowed my pride and called Raleigh, my older sister, the successful one. The one who'd made it out of our small town and into the big city with her finance degree in corn. Our office, she'd always looked down on me for staying behind, for choosing to fix computers instead of climbing corporate ladders, but she was family and I was desperate. Lyra, I need help, I said when she answered, my voice hoarse from the pain medication. I can't drive for at least a month, maybe more. I just need someone to pick me up from physical therapy today, please. The silence on the other end stretched like a taut wire. Then came the laugh, cold, sharp, cutting. Oh, Kale, always looking for handouts, aren't you? It's not a handout, it's 15 minutes of your time. I'm your brother. Half-brother, she corrected. As if those syllables somehow made our shared childhood meaningless. And I'm busy. Real people have real jobs, real responsibilities. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar sting of her dismissal. I'll figure something else out. You always do, don't you? Scraping by, making excuses, expecting the world to accommodate your failures. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, watching the rain streak down the window of my hospital room. That's when I made the first mistake. I believed things couldn't get worse. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with a notification. A screenshot from Facebook Marketplace. My room, with all my belongings laid out like items in a garage sale. The headline read, "Everything must go. He's not dead, just useless." My hands shook as I scrolled through the images. My gaming setup, my collection of vintage computer parts, my books, my clothes, everything I owned displayed like artifacts in a museum of broken dreams. The description was clinical, detached, brother moving out, all items must be sold immediately. Reasonable offers accepted. Then came the text from my sister. Tough love, little brother. Time to grow up. I called her immediately. What the hell is this? Problem solving, she said matter-of-factly. You can't pay your bills. You can't take care of yourself. And frankly, I'm tired of watching you fail. I'm selling your stuff to cover what you owe me in rent. What I owe you? I've been paying rent. Not enough. Not nearly enough for the privilege of living in my property. The pieces clicked together like a jigsaw puzzle made of betrayal. The house I'd been renting, the one I thought belonged to some faceless corporation, was hers. She'd been my landlord all along, collecting rent while pretending to be the successful sister who'd moved on. You can't do this. That's my property. Those are my things. Check your lease. Kale. Read the fine print. Unpaid medical bills constitute default. Everything in that room becomes property of the landlord if rent falls into arrears. My medical bills, the ones piling up because of an accident that wasn't my fault. The ones she knew about because I trusted her enough to complain to her about them. You're my sister. I'm a businesswoman, and this is business. The rain outside turned into a downpour, matching the storm brewing in my chest. But I wasn't broken yet, not completely. Because Raleigh had made one mistake. She thought she knew everything about me. She thought I was just the failure little brother who fixed computers and barely scraped by. She had no idea what I was really capable of. Physical therapy ended at 6 p.m. The rain was coming down in sheets by then, turning the world into a watercolor painting left out in the storm. My ribs screamed with every step, but I didn't have a choice. The bus stop was 3 miles away. And even if I could afford a taxi, which I couldn't, my pride wouldn't let me. So I walked through puddles that soaked through my worn sneakers, past cars that splashed me with gutter water as they rushed by, their occupants safe and dry and completely indifferent to the broken man limping along the shoulder. Every step sent lightning bolts of pain through my damaged body. But the physical hurt was nothing compared to the betrayal festering in my chest. My phone kept buzzing with notifications, Facebook Marketplace messages from strangers haggling over my life. Someone wanted my computer for $50. Another person offered $20 for my entire book collection. My gaming chair, the one I'd saved for months to buy, had 3 offers. The highest being $75. 22 years of collecting, creating, building a life reduced to a clearance sale. I turned onto Maple Street and saw them. Boxes. Dozens of soggy cardboard boxes lined up along the curb like tombstones in a cemetery of broken dreams. My belongings, my memories, my entire existence waterlogged and discarded like trash on collection day. A woman was rifling through one of the boxes, pulling out my old textbooks and examining them under a streetlight. She looked up when she saw me approaching, her expression shifting from curiosity to something that might have been pity. "This your stuff?" she asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Shame to see it all getting ruined out here. Whoever put it out should have waited for better weather." "Yeah," I managed. "Real shame." She selected the programming manuals and dropped a $10 bill into the coffee can someone had thoughtfully placed beside the boxes. Raleigh, probably. Always thinking about the profit margin, even when destroying someone's life. I stood there, in the rain, watching strangers pick through the remnants of my existence. A teenager grabbed my old gaming console. An elderly man examined my toolkit. A young mother sorted through my clothes, probably looking for something that might fit her kids. That's when I saw it, the box in the back, the one nobody had touched. Yet, it was smaller than the others, labeled in my own handwriting, "Electronics, MISC." Most people would skip right over it, assuming it was full of outdated cables and broken gadgets. They would be wrong. I approached slowly, checking to make sure no one was watching. The woman with the textbooks had moved on to another box. The teenager was negotiating with someone over my PlayStation. Everyone was focused on the more obvious treasures. I knelt beside the electronics box and carefully lifted the soggy cardboard flap. There, nestled between old phone chargers and random cables, was exactly what I'd hoped to find. A small black USB drive, no bigger than a thumb, wrapped in a waterproof case I'd made from electrical tape and plastic wrap years ago. My insurance policy, my ace in the hole. The thing Raleigh had no idea existed. I palmed the drive and closed the box, then made a show of looking through the other containers. To anyone watching, I was just another scavenger, hoping to find something valuable in the wreckage of some strangers. "Life, you taking anything?" the woman with the textbooks called over. I held up the electronics box. "Just this one. Looks like junk, but I might be able to salvage some parts." She nodded and went back to her treasure hunting. I lifted the box heavier than it looked, full of memories and obsolete technology, and started walking again. The rain was letting up slightly, but I was already soaked to the bone. As I walked away from that street, from that pile of my former life decomposing in the gutter, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger that was still there, burning, bright and hot in my chest. Not sadness that would come later, in the quiet hours of the night. Relief. For the first time in my adult life, I owned only what I could carry. No rent to pay, no obligations to anyone, no illusions about family loyalty to maintain. Raleigh thought she'd destroyed me, thought she'd reduced me to nothing. She was wrong about that too. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you're really worth, and sometimes, just sometimes, the person who betrays you hands you exactly the tools you need to destroy them in return. The USB drive felt warm in my pocket, humming with possibility. The Moonlight Motel wasn't the kind of place you'd find in travel brochures. $40 a night, weekly rates available, and management that didn't ask too many questions as long as you paid in cash and kept the noise down. It became my home for the next 2 weeks while I healed, planned, and prepared for what came next. Room 237 had everything I needed, a bed that only squeaked when I moved too quickly, a table large enough for my laptop, and most importantly, Wi-Fi that worked well enough for what I had in mind. I'd managed to salvage my old laptop from the electronics box, a machine I'd built myself from spare parts over the years. It wasn't pretty, but it was fast, reliable, and completely invisible to anyone who didn't know what they were looking at. The USB drive contained something Raleigh would never have expected me to possess. Copies of her digital life, not because I was some kind of stalker or criminal, but because 3 years ago, she'd asked me to fix her computer after a virus attack. Standard big sister behavior, demanding free tech support while simultaneously telling me my skills were worthless. What she didn't know was that I'd installed a small program during the cleanup. Nothing malicious, nothing that would hurt her computer or steal her personal information. Just a simple monitoring tool that would occasionally sync certain files to a secure server I maintain. I'd originally installed it to help protect her from future attacks to be able to restore her data if something went wrong again. I'd forgotten about it completely until the night she destroyed my life over the past 3 years. The program had faithfully recorded everything. Every document she'd created, every spreadsheet she'd modified, every financial record she'd touched, including the detailed records of her various investment accounts, tax documents, and most interestingly, a folder labeled emergency funds. Raleigh was paranoid about banks despite working in finance. She didn't trust traditional institutions with her personal wealth. Instead, she'd created a complex network of cryptocurrency wallets, offshore accounts, and digital assets that she managed personally. The folder contained passwords, private keys, recovery phrases, and detailed instructions for accessing accounts worth nearly $500,000. Her emergency fund, her safety net, her secret fortune that she'd hidden from tax authorities, from her employers, from everyone. I spent days studying her system, mapping out the connections, understanding the intricate web she'd woven around her money. She was clever. I had to give her that. The setup was sophisticated enough to avoid casual detection, but organized enough for her to manage alone. But she'd made one critical error. She documented everything, every password, every seed phrase, every backup method was meticulously recorded and stored on her computer. The same computer I'd been maintaining and monitoring for 3 years. On day 10 of my motel residence, I made my first move. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would trigger immediate attention. I simply transferred $5,000 from her least-monitored cryptocurrency wallet into a mixing service that would scramble the transaction history before depositing the funds into an account I'd created using techniques I'd learned during my computer repair work. $5,000 was small enough that she might not notice immediately. These wallets fluctuated in value daily. A $5,000 difference could easily be attributed to market volatility, but it was large enough to fund the next phase of my plan. I used the money to rent a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy. Just a one-bedroom place with good internet and a landlord who accepted cash deposits. For the first time in 2 weeks, I had a real address, a real place to operate from. The next day, I transferred another $10,000, then $15,000, then $25,000. Each transaction carefully spaced, using different wallets, different methods, different timing patterns. I was methodical, patient, invisible. By day 14, I'd moved nearly $200,000 out of her emergency fund and into accounts she couldn't trace. The beauty of her system was that it was designed to be secret, which meant she couldn't exactly call the police and report that someone had stolen money she'd been hiding from the government. I'd learned more than computer repair during my years fixing people's machines. I'd learned about human nature, about the kinds of secrets people kept buried in their digital lives. I'd learned about offshore banking from helping a client who was going through a messy divorce. I'd learned about cryptocurrency from a paranoid day trader who paid me in Bitcoin to clean malware off his mining rigs. Most importantly, I'd learned that the same technology people used to hide their secrets could be turned against them by someone who understood the systems better than they did. Raleigh thought she'd taught me a lesson about tough love and personal responsibility. She was wrong about that too. I was about to teach her a lesson about consequences. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my new apartment, watching the sunrise through clean windows while sipping coffee from a mug I'd bought with her money. My phone buzzed with an unknown number, but I knew exactly who it was before I answered. "Hello, Raleigh. What did you do?" Her voice was different from the last time we'd spoken. Gone was the cold confidence, the dismissive superiority. What remained was raw panic, barely contained rage, and something I'd never heard from her before. "Fear. I'm not sure what you mean. I've been settling into my new place. Thank you for asking. Don't play games with me. Kale, my emergency fund is gone. All of it. Someone accessed my accounts. And I know it was you." I leaned back in my chair, a comfortable office chair I'd purchased along with a proper desk, a new computer, and all the equipment I needed to restart my life. "That sounds serious. Have you called the police?" The silence stretched long enough that I could hear her breathing, sharp and irregular. We both knew she couldn't involve law enforcement. Reporting the theft would mean explaining where the money came from, how she'd hidden it, why she'd never declared it on her taxes. Her emergency fund wasn't just stolen, it was evidence of multiple federal crimes. "How?" she finally whispered. 3 years ago, you brought me your computer. You said it was infected, that you needed my help. You were so generous with your praise that day. Remember, finally, something useful from my useless brother. You even let me keep it for a week to make sure everything was clean. You installed something. You've been spying on me. I installed protection. I wanted to make sure you never got hurt by malware again. Call it brotherly love. I paused, savoring the moment. It's not my fault you decided to use that computer to manage illegal financial activities. For 3 years. Give it back. All of it now. Give what back? I don't have your money. Don't lie to me. I'm not lying. I don't have your money. What I have is my money funds I acquired through perfectly legal cryptocurrency transactions, using public blockchain networks. If you'd like to contest the ownership of those funds, you're welcome to provide documentation proving they belonged to you. I'm sure the IRS would be very interested in seeing those records. Another long silence. I could practically hear her calculating, trying to find an angle, a way to threaten or manipulate me back into submission. You can't do this. You can't just steal. Steal. That's a strong word. Let me tell you what theft actually looks like. My voice hardened. Theft looks like selling your brother's possessions while he's recovering from an accident. Theft looks like lying about owning his home for years while collecting rent. Theft looks like turning family into a business transaction and human beings into profit margins. That was different. That was what? Tough love. Teaching me responsibility. No, lie Raleigh. That was you showing me exactly who you really are. And now I'm showing you who I really am. I'll sue you. I'll take you to court. With what money? And more importantly, with what evidence that doesn't implicate you in tax evasion, wire fraud, and money laundering? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at a world that suddenly seemed full of possibilities. You know what the beautiful thing about cryptocurrency is? It's completely transparent. Every transaction is recorded on a public ledger. Anyone can see exactly when funds moved from your wallets to mine. Anyone can verify that I used standard legal methods to acquire digital assets through voluntary blockchain transactions. People will know it was you. People will know that someone transferred cryptocurrency between wallets using the private keys and passwords that you stored on your computer. They'll know that whoever did it had intimate knowledge of your secret financial system. What they won't know is how I came to possess that information. Unless you'd like to explain that part yourself. She was crying now. I could hear it in her breathing, the subtle catching in her voice. 3 weeks ago, that sound might have moved me. 3 weeks ago, I might have felt sorry for her. 3 weeks ago, I still believed family meant something. Please, she whispered. I need that money. That's everything I have. No, I corrected her. That's everything you had. Just like my room full of possessions was everything I had before you sold it and threw what was left in the rain. I'll make it right. I'll pay you back for everything. You can't pay me back. You don't have any money. Remember, it's gone. All of it. How does that feel? Lie Raleigh. How does it feel to lose everything overnight? To have someone you trusted take away your security, your safety, your future? You're my brother, half-brother. I corrected, using her own words against her. And you're right, which makes this so much worse, doesn't it? Because when family betrays family, when blood spills blood, the wounds never really heal. I hung up before she could respond. 6 months later, I barely recognized my own life. The money I'd taken from Raleigh, and make no mistake, I had taken it, legal technicalities aside, became the foundation for something I'd never imagined possible. Not just survival, but success. I used the first $50,000 to properly establish my computer repair business. Not the hand-to-mouth operation I'd run out of my bedroom, but a real company with a real office, proper equipment, and insurance. I hired Yarek, a young programmer fresh out of community college who reminded me of myself at his age, brilliant, but overlooked, hungry for a chance to prove himself. The next $100,000 went into investments, not the flashy cryptocurrency games Raleigh had preferred, but solid, boring, legitimate assets, index funds, municipal bonds. A diversified portfolio that would grow steadily over time, without requiring me to hide anything from anyone. But it was the final $50,000 that changed everything. I used it to buy the building where I'd been renting office space, a small, 2-story structure in the downtown business district with room for expansion and, more importantly, rental income from the 3 other businesses that occupied the ground floor. For the first time in my life, I was a landlord. The irony wasn't lost on me. My physical therapy had ended months ago, but the accident's gifts kept revealing themselves. The settlement with the drunk driver's insurance company came through in month for $200,000 for my pain, suffering, and permanent partial disability in my left shoulder. Money I would never have received if I'd still been living in Liralay's shadow, still been dependent on her for shelter and support. Being thrown out into the rain had forced me to grow in ways I never would have otherwise. The victim impact statement I'd written for the driver's sentencing hearing was raw, honest, and devastatingly effective. The judge mentioned my courage in rebuilding my life from nothing when he handed down the sentence. My lawyer said it was one of the most compelling cases she'd ever presented. Liralee tried calling 17 more times over those 6 months. I answered exactly once. 3 months after our last conversation, I lost my job. She said without preamble, "I'm sorry to hear that." They found irregularities in my personal financial records. During the background check for my promotion, questions about unreported income, unexplained cryptocurrency transactions, potential tax evasion, my security clearance was revoked. That sounds complicated. You destroyed my life. I was standing in my office, looking out at the small team of technicians I now employed. Good people, skilled people. People who deserved better than the hand-to-mouth existence I'd escaped. No, Liralee. I saved my own. I'm going to be evicted. I can't afford my apartment anymore. Have you considered moving back home? I hear there are some rental properties in the old neighborhood. Don't. Her voice cracked. Please don't. Don't what? Offer practical advice. Suggest you take personal responsibility for your situation. I thought you believed in tough love. I made a mistake. I was angry. You were exactly who you always were. The only mistake you made was assuming I would always be who you thought I was. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was small, defeated. What do you want? Money, an apology. What would it take for you to make this right? There is no making this right. There's only learning to live with the consequences of our choices. I paused, watching Yarek explain something to a customer with infinite patience. You taught me that family is just biology. Blood doesn't create obligation. And shared genetics don't guarantee loyalty. Thank you for the lesson, Kale. Please. I hung up and blocked her number. Some wounds are too deep to heal, some bridges to burn to rebuild. She'd made her choice when she threw my life away like garbage. I'd made mine when I decided to stop being her victim. 3 days later, I got a call from our old neighbor, Mrs. Henley. Liralee had moved back home, back into our childhood house that had sat empty since our mother died. She'd taken a job at the local grocery store, working the night shift, barely making enough to cover utilities and food. She asked me to call you, Mrs. Henley said. She wants you to know she's sorry. I appreciate you telling me, I said, and I meant it, but her apology isn't mine to accept. It belongs to the person she threw away. That person doesn't exist anymore. Mrs. Henley was quiet for a moment. What happened between you two? She taught me who I really was, I said, and I taught her who she really was. The lesson was more expensive than either of us expected.